Dr. Bhan, you're one of the 10 scientists who were selected from the AXA Research Fund COVID-19 call for projects. Your research is about delivering social protection to informal workers in India. What are the goals of this research project?
So the goals of our research project are to basically underscore the fact that all the different ways in which the Indian state and non-state actors in India had to innovate and strive to get immediate relief, specifically to informal workers throughout this year, are basically a map, both of the kind of gaps that our social protection systems had before the crisis, but also a map of what kinds of everyday social protection we should have had in place and should build now in order to anticipate the next crisis. So very simply, we think that it's critical to learn from the relief work that's dominated this year globally and say what institutional lessons, what entitlement frameworks, what social protection imagination can we take forward from the crisis into the everyday and turn it into not just relief work, but actually into new substantive gains for social protection, specifically for informal workers.
Right, so it's really a focus on lessons learned then. How will your background and experience in education and politics inform this research project?
So I'm part of a set of researchers working on this project, all of whom sort of ask very particular questions about cities in the global south, and particularly about Indian cities. And our training, both as urban sociologists, as planners, as folks who look at labor and employment, questions who look at social identity in the Indian context, have basically brought us to a point where we say that practice around social protection has to be deeply rooted in the particular conditions of different contexts. And that the questions of informal work and the questions of the vulnerability and resilience of informal work are essentially the core of our interdisciplinary groups training, and how to learn from these conditions, how to follow the lead of workers and worker organizations in coping, thriving, flourishing despite extraordinary challenges. In many ways, I think that's the way we see our work experience as having been structured over the past few years. So we've been working with domestic worker unions, with the state governments, with non-state actors, and learning from each of them on what they have to offer to a broader understanding of social protection systems. So I think it's really about the partnerships that we've been able to build. It's about being able to learn from workers and organizations themselves. It's about following those stories rather than any understanding of an expertise that we bring. So I think of us really as translators, as receivers of knowledge, as people listening carefully at a moment where there's a lot of information that should not slip out of our hands.
I see. And then I guess extending from that, what are the practical applications of this research, and are there any lessons that could be applied outside of India?
So I think that, a lot of urban researchers use the term cities of the global south. And when we use this term, we refer actually to a set of cities in the world where in one description you say it is the majority that holds social, economic, and political vulnerability, right? So 8 out of 10 workers in India work in the informal economy. So these are fundamental structures. So the scale of application of these learnings is enormous. And these are, the informal economy is a way of organizing the current universe, which is not just true of India, it is true of much of the world. Even, for example, in the last statements by the International Labour Organization, 18% of the American workforce is considered to be informal. So the changing nature of how workers are finding themselves increasingly distant from labor protections, from labor rights, from justified and dignified working conditions, from job, wage, and employment security are not an Indian condition. They are very much a global condition at this time. So I think that the lessons of how to reconnect work with the dignity of worker protections is a fundamental 21st century global question. And it's being asked in new ways from the ways we knew how to ask it in the Industrial Revolution, when we last sort of created a lot of what we understand today as understandings of labor rights and labor forms. And I think it's important to both say, what does it mean to create this from outside that time and that certain political economy, but also from places where these theories never emerged from places. This is about Lagos and Cairo and Johannesburg and Dhaka and Manila and Delhi and Mumbai. It's not just about what, in my discipline, the great cities of London, Paris, New York, and Tokyo. So I think this has lessons for everywhere. but these are lessons that come from somewhere. And I think that's a very important kind of rootedness. So we don't want ideas that are parochial, but we also don't want ideas that are placeless and universal. We want ideas that are knowledge that is rooted and comes from place. So I think that this knowledge will travel. I think it will have extraordinary lessons for questions of work, dignity, and social protection globally. And I think it will particularly affect cities of the global south that share Indian cities' configuration, particularly around labor in the informal economy.
Great. Well, we're really excited about this project, and we're really looking forward to the results. So, Dr. Bhan, thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot.